Well, I started flying when I was, let's see, 60s. I was a freshman in high school. You know, my dad belonged to a glider club, and he got me kind of hooked into that. And for gliders, you only need to be 14 to solo. So when I was 14, I started flying lessons. And then by 1969, I had my license, for glider. And flew gliders up until about 1989, I think was the last logbook entry there. And then when we moved down to Cumberland, the guy that lived across the street from us was a pilot, and he got me involved in the Experimental Aircraft Association. And two of the guys from that chapter started 1121, the chapter I'm in, just to get the building operations going back again. So they'd been looking around, they found a design that really didn't require a whole lot of special tools. It could be basically done with hand tools, with the exception of a few parts. And one of the two guys was a machinist, and he had the access to the high-end equipment for forms and things like that. But they bought enough material to build 5 airplanes. It was the Zenith 601 HD. And the other fellow that started the chapter, he was a part supplier for Indy cars. So he had access to material, aircraft quality material, at a lot cheaper than he can buy it in most places, and he could buy it bulk. So the amount of material we bought to build 5 airplanes only totaled about $3,000, where if you went and bought the kit at the time was about $14,000. But anyway, out of that group, they had 5 sets of partners, and of the 5 original plans that were started, 2 of them got completed that I know of. When we got our airworthiness certificate, the FAA told us it's welcome to the 3% club. And it's like, what's that? I says, well, 3% of airplanes that start out as projects get completed. Yeah. So it's like, in that case, we beat the odds in that chapter because we had a 40% completion rate compared to 3. So, so there's
was the Zenith. So, how long did you have that then?
See, we got that one complete. We started on it in 1995. Got the airworthiness for it in 2009. So we spent the guts of 14 years building it. But we were working one night a week, 4 hours or so. Out of 52 weeks in a year, we probably worked on it 48 to 50. So it wasn't like we had a whole lot of time at any one point, but just kept consistently working on it. We flew it for, when did we sell it? 2014. So we flew it for 5 years. And in that 5 years, it had 625 hours on it. Just before Deirdre got married, we, did a flight around Lake Michigan we were airplane number 13 because nobody wanted the number. And there's actually 14 airplanes on that trip. There was a 3-day trip. We took off from Indianapolis, and then the first stop was in Manitowoc, Wisconsin. And then the second night, we were at St. Ignace, which is basically just the Upper Peninsula mainland portion from Mackinac Island. So overnighted there, and then coming back the next day, back to Indianapolis. And in the meantime, I was looking for another project, and I was just looking through Barnstormers and found a guy that had an 0200 for sale that was rebuilt, and the airplane came with it. So I bought the engine for $8,000. The airplane, which was nothing but at that stage, really a basket case. So I picked it up in February of 15, rented a Penske truck. A friend of mine, Chris Harvin, we drove up to get it. It was 25 below zero, 30 mile an hour wind. So anyway, we finally got the thing loaded up and driving back home. And it was just the weekend we went up there to get it. We did it primarily because there was a bad storm moving in. We're trying to get there and back before it hit. Well, we kind of got caught in the middle of it on the way back. And the number of cars that we saw that were down at the bottom of the slope on the interstate or down in the median or stuff like that, and the wind was howling. And we had a 29-foot box van, and this airplane only weighs about 760 pounds, so it's like as far as the truck was concerned, it was essentially empty. And I was having all kind of fun trying to keep that truck on the road in a lane. We got back here, we parked the truck here in front of the hangar about 2:30 in the morning. You know, when we got back, put out might have been a text, but anyway, didn't expect anybody to respond. But you know, Chris and I were out here to unload the truck the next day, and I had about 18 people out here to help. And I was like, it's kind of it's kind of nice that, you know, the grapevine worked that fast and had that kind of help. You know, it's nice to see that kind of support, but it was actually too much because you couldn't get more than about 3 or 4 people in that truck without stepping on each other. So we ended up doing the bucket brigade, you know, just passing parts out of the back of it and stacking them in the hangar. But spent the next almost 2 years before I got the thing back to flying again. I think the first flight was in May of 2017. I had a bunch of time in that Zenith. You know, I had about 600 hours in it, but I've never flown one of these. So I was like, there's a Davis Builders group on the internet, and I just basically put up on the bulletin board if there's anybody there that would be interested in, you know, just flying with me for a couple hours just so I had an idea how the thing felt. And there's a guy out in St. Louis, Mike Wilson. He said, yeah, come on down. You know, so we drove over there. It was a Memorial Day weekend. I do remember that. So we spent the weekend over in St. Louis. We flew for probably 2.5, 3 hours. I got a couple of dozen takeoffs and landings in it, and found out that it actually flew pretty much like the 601 did, except it was just a little bit, all the numbers were a little bit faster. But as far as the way it handled, the way it felt, it's pretty much the same. You know, so at the end of that, I tried to fill his tank up, and he wouldn't let me do it. You know, I was like, kind of a typical EAA attitude. You know, I was like, yeah, I'll help somebody else out, but no, this is no problem. I got no problem doing it. You know, and I've run across that in a lot of different EAA groups, or anybody that belongs to EAA. You know, they're more than willing to bend over backwards to help somebody, and they ain't looking for a dime. Anywhere you go with it, you come back and there's going to be people standing around trying to figure out, what the hell is it? You know, when people ask me, I'd kind of jokingly tell them it's the freeze-dried Bonanza, because it's a V-tailed airplane like a Bonanza, but it's half the size and it looks like you ran it through a trash compactor, you know, because everything on it's pretty square and angular. But it definitely gets attention whenever, you know, wherever you go, because it is a rare airplane. You know, it's a 1964 home-built design that was a scratch-built, you know, because back in '64 they didn't make kits. And supposedly there was like 300 and some sets of plans sold. And I'd seen figures saying that there's like 80 of them flying, but I doubt that significantly, because if you look in the FAA database, there's only about 12 of them show up. And of those 12, there's only about 5 or 6 that are airworthy. Very few people even know what it is, because it's in the aviation world, especially for experimental aviation, it is definitely a rare airplane. You know, you very rarely see one. But anyway, but yeah, I mean, up at Oshkosh, I mean, there's a lot of comments, because it is, I'll have to admit, I do think it's a nice looking one. You know, it's got an unusual paint job on it, but the biggest comments I was getting when they looked inside and they saw that it was all an all glass panel. You know, so it's kind of an oxymoron, because it's an airplane that was a 1960s design, and here it is with a 21st century panel in it. You know, it's like, it's got 2-axis autopilot and all the stuff that's supposed to have on it now. And there's one fellow that knew Leon Davis, the guy that designed it, and he goes, man, Leon wouldn't believe what's inside this one.